What's up, golf friends? This is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. We got the three-man weave back. I'm here with Andrew Lewis and Joseph. What's going on, fellas?
What's happening, Jim?
Jim, good to see you. Joseph.
So this is episode 38. We also got the live stream going for our friends on Twitter. Switching it up a little bit. We got this episode. Normally we have our main interview, and then we have the angle of attack segment with Andrew. Wanted to combine that into our opening tee shot segment, sponsored by our friends at Strakaline. Remind you guys, you use the code DRIVEN to receive 20% off of your yardage book order. Really helps us out a lot. And the reason we wanted to switch it up, so we have got Ryan Frazer on this episode. We had him back on last year, and it had this kind of novel idea. Ryan had posted something on Twitter around like the tournament winners last year, and we really wanted to use it as an opportunity to provide kind of background information and almost do like a fantasy draft of junior golf tournaments, and use it as an opportunity to talk about the ins and outs, from a parent standpoint, a parent of a player standpoint, or really Ryan attacking it from his angle, which is like, what do coaches want to see? Like which tournaments really mean the most from that perspective? And we got into a lot of these kind of wrinkles around, like, some events get AJGA points, some events get have a nice Wagger boost, some neither. And like when you're kind of deciding amongst all of these tournaments, kind of sorting through all of this, it's easy to get confused. It's easy to make a wrong decision, and we're trying to do what we can for our kids. So just really wanted to use kind of a fun little activity, but as an opportunity to provide a lot of guidance. These are really what we focus on, are really kind of like the top kind of 25 or 30 junior golf tournaments in the country. And what we want to talk about in this angle of attack episode is, Andrew, you brought up another point, which is kind of like, how do you ultimately get into these events, like get into these higher level events, get into these AJGA tournaments. And you kind of, brought to my attention this unique kind of struggle that folks in like regional and local tours are facing to even get into that stage, to get into open events. So maybe you want to, just provide a little bit of context there.
Yeah, so this really stemmed out of an issue I was finding with my son, and then some of the kids that I coach that were trying to get into some AJGA events. The AJGA works in two different ways. You either earn status through playing in their events and playing well, like finishing in the top 5, you're in fully exempt status, or what most kids, I would say a majority of the kids, 80-90%, are having to earn their way into these AJGAs through performance-based stars. And stars are earned through a couple ways: playing in qualifiers, playing in your local tours, and then obviously playing in AJGA events, you potentially earn more. So it really came down to, my son only has 10 stars, and to get into an AJ, the AJ would say you have to have about 18. So I start looking at, well, how on earth is he going to get to this 18 number? He would basically have to win 2 of the local tour events here, which would be like a banner year if he were to win 2 of these 36-hole events. So I started kind of wondering, is this an issue everywhere in the country? Like, is the payout in Florida or Arizona or California, where you kind of hear, these are the best markets in the country? I would say North Texas has to be about one of the most competitive. And so I started doing some research and basically figuring out that playing in other parts of the country kind of benefits you from this perspective. Like, if you go and finish top 10 in a certain area, you get 4 stars. Yet in North Texas, you only get 1, or you have to win to get those 4. So it just started to kind of open up this idea that maybe things aren't equitable. And that's when I called you, and I basically vented for about probably half an hour of like, how is my kid ever going to play in any of this stuff? So you then did some research. Maybe you can fill us in on what you found. Yeah.
So like we typically do, I think this is really how these driven.golf kind of blog posts kind of start. That's the origin story, is they sort of start with like a problem statement or something we observe in the junior or amateur golf landscape, or even like we took on some wrinkles in the PGA Tour. So I'd encourage people to go to driven.golf. We've got an article, which I think I have an inspired name for it. It's called Starbitrage. And it really talks about the nuances here, right? The wrinkles, like you said, it would take multiple like stellar performances to even get to a point where you're earning enough to even try to get into a tournament. And a lot of this like funnel really what you ultimately find out is like you need to really kind of funnel towards AJG events, but it's kind of this vicious cycle because they're difficult to get into. And then also, if you do get into one, you almost like absolutely have to perform well. Like at a minimum, be in the top half of the field. Otherwise, like you've sort of wasted this opportunity that you have, and who knows when you can get back on the hamster wheel. So it's a real, like I feel for you. And the more I started looking into it, there are vast differences. And it really, I understand what the AJGA is trying to do in terms of, trying to get people into their events and reward performance into their events. But the way they're assigning these performance points, it's so outsized between the local and regional tournaments versus their tournaments that it's almost in some cases like a 10-1 or 11-1 ratio. And, that doesn't really quite sit right with me, honestly. I mean, I think that if you look at what the AJGA has stated, what they're trying to do, like they have reduced entry fees. They are at least mindful of the amount of expenses it takes to be, a competitive junior player and travel around the country. Like, I do think that you could think of these regional and local tours as really like a feeder system into the AJGA, but they're kind of making it almost impossible to kind of make your way through that avenue. Like you're saying, you're trying to get like these onesies and twosies stars to add up to a point where you could actually get into an event. The other wrinkle, which I think is just maybe unique to this year, is they have so many AJGA open events. And previously, for the most part, if you got a top 5, you got fully exempt. So I think there's more events than ever, which means that there's more fully exempt players than ever. But they changed it so now it's top 3. And you carry this full exempt for when you get it this year, you get it for this year and then the following year. So you have all these players from last year have full exempt this year. Really, and you have less opportunities to get full exempt this year for players that aren't full exempt already. So it's actually harder for them to sort of get up to this upper echelon, and try to compete. It's a bit of a transition year. We know this KJ Choi tournament, which is closing entries this week, I believe. There's 30 spots, and there are 108 fully exempt players applied to that. So then they use the AJGA rankings to that. So you're going to probably need to be a top, 120 player or something in AJGA, even to have a spot in that tournament. So, it puts all this pressure on just getting in. And look, I pulled, the main Texas tours. I started looking at Southern California and Northern California, a lot of similar phenomenon in these local and regional tournaments. And I'm hoping that, eventually we get through these other Arizona, Florida, et cetera. And maybe it's enough to like shine a light on the issue. And like, I do think that, I threw out a proposal. Like, I think maybe the local tour should get like a 60% of the performance as opposed to like 10%, or in some cases even less than 10%. That seems like an equitable solution. So maybe there's enough data, getting enough parents like yourself sort of riled up to, and maybe some change could take place.
Yeah, that would be nice. When you look at, okay, so what are parents supposed to do? Like you said, I think the best option is to try to get into these AJGAs anytime that you have an opportunity. And that really starts with playing in a preview event. So what I've been telling people lately, as we've kind of uncovered this, is one, I think a lot of people are like, well, do I really need to play these events? I really, really think in most cases, if you want to play like at a good school, you probably need to be doing that. So starting your kid as early as possible in the Junior All-Stars, Junior All-Star previews. If you're someone like my son, a 2027, 2026, 2028, playing in these just open series preview events. Because I think the thing is like we have to operate inside of the system as it currently is. I mean, yeah, maybe we want to change a little bit, but that's not going to change tomorrow. So then you think, well, what do I do in the meantime? And I think that the answer is, I mean, you can keep playing the regional stuff for sure, but definitely be willing to travel. And I think a lot of people are fairly uneducated about the difference between the events. Like they're not at all the same. Like we were just talking about, there's one up in Iowa. That event is not going to be looked at the same as like the KJ Choi from a points perspective. There's not going to be as many fully exempt. So if you're willing to travel, you can definitely get into some of these things. I do realize that's a barrier for some people with finances, but and as you said, once you do get your chance, like there is that is the nice thing about golf. Like when you get your chance and you do take advantage of it, then you're set. Like it just like on the PGA Tour, it really takes one good week in your junior career to kind of set you up for 2 years. If you go and finish in the top 3 or top 5 of one of these AJs, you're literally set up for 2 years. So if you can do it early in the season too, that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, so I would say a couple related to that. Obviously, like the preview series, that was like the number one in terms of the payout and performance. So I would encourage folks to definitely take advantage of that. And like you said, it's going to come down to being prepared for the moment. So I would encourage you to take a look back at some of our angle attack episodes, whittling down your scoring average, some of the tournament prep stuff. Like you want that to be a good performance. And look, like a lot of times when kids are playing in their first AJGA tournament, it's easy to get wigged out. Like I think we've all been there, right? So I think like to be able to avoid some of those potential pitfalls and likely probably like avoiding big numbers will you do that and you're probably going to finish in the top half of the field, I would imagine, or have a good chance of getting some stars out of it.
Yeah.
The other wrinkles that we have in a series of recommendations. You mentioned the Junior All-Stars. I think the qualifiers before the tournament, even if you don't plan on playing in the tournament, I think can be an easy star, probably an easier star than playing in a local event or a regional tour for sure. And a lot of the Junior All-Stars, their qualifiers don't fill up. So even if you are in the tournament field, enter the qualifier and use that as your practice round. Yes. The other quick plug that I added was play in the U.S. Junior Qualifier. They pay out a couple stars pretty deep into that field. I think top half or top 40% related to that, and that's just a good experience regardless. And there's no downside to doing it. So I think there's a good opportunity to play in your local U.S. Junior Qualifier, even if you might be like a year or two early, probably with respect to having a chance of actually qualifying. So yeah, we have got this article on driven.golf. It's called Star Arbitrage. Really just wanted to highlight this issue because I'm imagining a lot of the listeners, they're either in the same boat that you are, or they have been in the past, or they're about to be. And I think just being able to navigate this scene intelligently, kind of knowing where the most efficient way to spend your time and resources and travel, like that's really one of the services that we're trying to provide through this podcast and through the blog. So we try to cover a lot of that. But if you have questions, like I would encourage folks to reach out to you through Instagram, Andrew Lewis Golf, or reach out to us via the podcast, and we're happy to address any questions that you might have.
Yeah, that's great too. Quickly, so Cameron has 10 stars. 9 of his were through qualifiers in the U.S. Junior. So he got 1 from playing in the regional stuff. So I would second that. That's what you should do.
All right. And then look, if you have success and you get into the next stage where you have options in terms of what tournaments you can pick from, like national tournaments, invitationals. And one of the things I do with Ryan is, again, pulling out the numbers in terms of kind of tiering the categories of junior golf and how many kind of top tier kids are playing in certain events, how many second tier kids are playing in events, and really thinking about the different implications and different wrinkles if you're trying to really build a really strong resume as you move on in the process. I will say, like, the one thing that I probably didn't fully appreciate kind of getting into this journey is that, like, every year is like vastly different from the last. Like, assuming your kid is continuing to improve, like, you're going to want to put those challenges and those higher bars in front of them. And that means probably playing in events that they maybe haven't played in before. So, like, you always have to have one sort of eye on if you're performing well, like, what's the next goal? What's the next obstacle? Like, how do I get into that tournament that's going to allow my son or daughter to have that continued improvement, continued sort of heightened competitive environment? And those are the things that really lead to long run development over time. So when I was getting into this, I had no idea that was sort of the case. I just figured, like, oh, he's going to be playing this. We really enjoyed this tournament. We're going to be playing in it for the next 2 years, and that hasn't really been the case at all. Like you sort of open new doors for yourself.
As you would hope so. Yeah. Graduate up for sure.
Well, awesome, Andrew. Really appreciate the time, and I hope folks enjoy episode 38 with Ryan Frazer. And let me know if I got any of my fantasy picks wrong. Ryan Frazer, welcome back to the Driven Golf Pod. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Jim?
Yeah, it's great to see you. We had you back a while ago. Actually, I wanted to mention one thing. Our most recent episode we had with Lawrence Donegan of McKellar Magazine, and I saw that you're featured in. I haven't gotten the issue yet, but you're featured in issue 8 as one of the characters that they profile. So that's these golf worlds are now colliding. That's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's crazy. I never thought I'd be interviewed like for a magazine. That's pretty cool. Lawrence is a great guy.
So anybody who listened to the last episode, so Ryan runs Agora Golf. And as we mentioned last time, you really serve as like a service to college golf coaches, and really this go-between, this really value-added go-between between coaches, parents, and players, really just helping them navigate the scene. I meant to tell you this the last time you were on. There is one person on the planet that I get notifications for on Twitter, and that is Ryan Frazer. So,
wow.
So you may wonder why I'm always quick to respond to some of your tweets. Is because I'm always abreast of. I always get notified when you tweet something new. So
that's a compliment. I should probably tweet better then. Because sometimes I just get some random stuff.
Yeah, that's great. So in any case, I wanted to bring you back because we had this idea. Actually, it sparked from one of your recent tweets. You tweeted a little while ago around this interesting factoid that listed like what you consider maybe like 25 or 30 junior events in 2024, and this tidbit that there wasn't a repeat winner or multiple winner in any of those events. They were won by 25 different kids, and it was interesting to see the different events across the landscape. Some of them AJJ, some of them not. Some of them regional tournaments, invitationals, etc. And I think it speaks to sort of the depth of quality across junior golf to really dictate that, you had all these different winners. Maybe someone who's closer to it might have realized that like probably the top 2 juniors didn't win any of these events last year, which was pretty interesting to see. But it sort of sparked this idea in my mind, is like somebody who's maybe just seeing a tournament as maybe just a name on a sheet, and not knowing too much about the history, the strength of the field, whether or not it's worth AJGA points or not. Look, like us junior golf parents, we have finite resources. We're trying to do what we can on to best serve our kids. We obviously love them and are looking out for their best interests. We don't always get it right, and I think like information is power when it comes to this junior golf landscape. And I had this idea, like, let's have like almost like a fantasy draft. I know you're a big football guy. Let's have a fantasy draft of college golf tournaments, and just go. We'll have a little bit of back and forth. I'll let you have the first pick. We won't do a snake draft, but just as an opportunity to just like bring up a tournament, allow us to discuss, some of the wrinkles, some of the nuances. And I think through that, hopefully it can help provide some guidance and information to parents that are dealing with these same sort of choices and trade-offs. And look, like, I want to come out and say, anytime you rank something, people are going to disagree with the rankings, right? That's just sort of the nature of things. We're not meant to offend any of these tournament directors, any of these junior golf people that are pouring their lives and livelihoods into junior golf. We want this to be more of a celebration, if anything, but also recognizing that as a parent, we can't play in all 20, 25 of these things. Like, we don't have the time, resources, there's competing interests, conflicting interests. And, I'm just as a parent, trying to bring in some of these things that I would consider when deciding amongst these tournaments. So if you're picked later than another tournament, like, another parent might come up with a different approach because of geographic bias or, any other number of things that you might be trying to optimize for your kid. So anyways, I just wanted to kick that off And then we can get into some of these wrinkles and some of the nuances and implications as we get into it. So so now that we've set the groundwork, I guess I need to put you on the clock for the first pick.
Okay. To me, for the first pick of like maybe the top junior boys event, it's recently changed. For the first 10 years of the Agora Golf lifespan, I think I started in 2013. I would have said Sage Valley without a doubt. The Junior Invitational Sage Valley. Guys that won that claimed that, Scotty Scheffler, I remember talking to him. He thought that was a bigger win than his U.S. Junior. But with the changes they made a few years ago, with just making the field smaller, I feel like the field's just too small. So I got to go with the U.S. Junior as the biggest event that on the boys' side, and the one that it's got the most history. It gets you invites into majors. I mean, it's the biggest one.
Yeah. So, well, I would tend to agree with you. I was thinking about this, like Trevor Gashesky, who won the U.S. Junior at Oakland Hills. How many juniors would trade their year for Trevor's? And there are other events that he played in, he didn't perform nearly as well. Sure. But in any case, like he's got a resume that most juniors would trade places for because of, like you said, the history and lineage of the U.S. Junior. Like his name is on that trophy, and it will be there etched in time forever. And I think that's one thing. Like we tend to elevate these junior events in a lot of ways. Like probably 10 years from now, no one's really going to remember. Maybe you might remember because you're like an encyclopedia. But the significance of someone winning an event back in 2012 on these junior golf, it tends to dissipate over time. So 100%. I think of it along the lines of a U.S. Amateur and the majors, at least in the perspective of junior golf, in terms of lasting legacy of winning that event. I think it's U.S. Junior, and then it's everything else. So I would tend to agree with you there.
Yeah. I mean, it is, but I do feel that there was a big stretch there when the Sage Valley, when it was 54 guys, and it started out, I think it was like 27 Americans and 27 internationals. I mean, it was super strong. Incredibly competitive. It's still incredibly competitive and super strong. It's just a smaller field, and whereas the U.S. Junior has gone from 156 kids to 264. That's impressive. So
yeah, you definitely a deserving champion. And then the match play element is super cool. They don't get that at a lot of places. So, all right, so very good pick. I'm not going to question that. Okay. My first round pick. Actually, my draft board had a different name. But the more I've looked into it, I do think the Junior Invitational at Sage Valley deserves recognition and would be my first round draft pick. The more I dig into the history and some of the names that have won it, and I there's this term that comes up time and time again around Junior Invitational, where parents and players are like, it's the best week in junior golf. Yeah. And the other thing that I hear from time and time again is it's the Masters of junior golf. And so I think those two things alone, I think it really speaks volume to that. You did say the international field, it is going to be one of the highest, if you're thinking about WAGR, it's definitely going to be one of the highest WAGR power rated events. It was like 420 last year. And I think honestly, it's like trending towards 450 or above. So anything that's probably the closest that any of junior boys event would come to being ranked as a U.S. Junior, and in with 36 players, that really speaks to the depth at the top of the field in terms of the quality. They really bring kids from all around the world, so that's pretty cool. It's hard to argue with that logic. So,
and the kids it is the best week of their junior golf life is what I hear often. I mean, kids still when they're in college, if they played in that, they'll rag on their teammates that didn't make it, and I mean, they talk about it. Everyone enjoys that week. Yeah. It is a great honor to get an invite and to play in it, and it's just a super fun. It's just a great tournament and on a great course, and just a few miles away from Augusta National.
Yeah, was it 2 years ago? You had Pot Guider was playing in the Junior Invitational, won by a mile, and then he was playing at the Masters like a month and a half later.
And he was hitting the ball further. Cameron Champ was a big hitter. He still is. He's super long, and he was the longest I remember in junior golf. But until I saw Paul Guider a couple of years ago, I was like, "Oh my God, this kid destroys it."
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so what's your second pick?
Oh, I think I'm going to go with an AGA Invitational just because the AGA's puts on a lot of great invitationals, and they do such an amazing job for junior golf. And it was kind of a hard one. Do I go with their winter one that's coming up here, the Simplify? But I'm going to go the junior players because it's at I'm junior players. It's at TPC Sawgrass. Again, if you look at the people that have won that event too, it's a great list of names. It's always it gets a couple good international players. So it's I just think that's a super strong field. They used to have caddies, before COVID. They used to provide caddies for the kids, so it was really cool. It's still super cool because you're at TPC Sawgrass playing for a championship. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think they've done a good job, when the players rolls around, talking about how many of those players have played in the junior players back in the day. And that's obviously like a growing number as this tournament grows in its stature and its legacy. And I was thinking about it like, my son's played in the last two and they'll probably play in, I guess, one more, I guess. But just like the opportunity to play tournament golf at TPC Sawgrass, I know it's not under the same conditions, September versus, the spring, but just the opportunity to go through those routines. Like you sort of know and learn the course and the rhythms of the course over time. For those players that do go on to play professionally and hopefully play in a real players championship, that has to be pretty help. That has to help quite a bit. It's pretty instructive towards players as they continue their growth of, because it's not even an overly long course, right? But just like the shot shaping and the shot requirements that are in order to play well there. I think the same guys that are going to do well in junior golf, that should translate to professional golf, you would think.
Yeah, you got to keep it in play there. You can't just bomb it and go find it because it might be in a lake.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention here is I did a little bit of homework. I think I sent this to you. Is when I think about these junior events, I think there's maybe these tiers or maybe inherent tiers that are sort of within it. So what I looked at junior golf scoreboard players ranked 1 through 25 currently. And then I combined them with because you had 24 graduates that are no longer on junior golf scoreboard. So I looked at the guys that were 1 to 15 in the 2024 class. So I sort of created them as 40 guys or maybe like top tier players. Sure. And then the next guys, which would be 26 to 50 on JGS, and then 16 through 30 in class of 2024, considering them the second tier. And what I looked at is how many of those guys played in these events that we're going to talk about in their sort of last opportunity that they had to play it. Right. And I think what shines is like when you have like, for instance, the junior players, 35 of these 40 guys in the top tier played in their last junior players. Like that tells you like the importance of that event amongst those players, that they're choosing not to pass up on it. So I think that speaks volumes towards like that event where, whereas U.S. junior, they may have to qualify and you're not going to get. So that was actually the highest kind of tier one ratio of any event was the junior players amongst those 40 guys. Sage Valley is a little bit different, but it was 22 of the 40, because you have those international players, but only one in the second tier. So you're really only, it's 36 players, but you're only getting the best of the best that are getting invited to that. So I think it does seem to align very closely with sort of that Masters feel where you've got a smaller field, and the guys that are there are really the best of the best that are there competing for that sure. title. So, all right. Yeah. So you mentioned Simplify. That would be my pick. I think Simplify has this really unique spot at the start of the year where guys are showing up, and it's kind of like it sort of sets the tone for the season in a lot of ways. Yeah. And again, like 31 of the 40 guys, like most of the guys are showing up in that tournament. If you look at the field that for the event that's starting here in a few weeks, it's absolutely stacked. Like it was 250 in Wagger points, and I think it's trending towards like 325 this year. So I think that just demonstrates like the growth of that event and the depth of the field winning that event can really set you up for success, over the course of the year and getting into the other events and setting your Wyndham Cup, Junior President's Cup in those years. Like getting that 225 points of that right out of the gates is really a nice way to start the year. So I think simplifying and everything they do with the event, I think just kind of speaks excellence in terms of making it a great experience for all the kids involved and honoring, the veterans, et cetera. I think they do a great job. I'm really excited to see that again this year.
Yeah, it's a big course, but you can bomb it and go find it. But you have a lot of, which is great this time of year because you have a lot of kids that are it's the winter months. They don't necessarily get as much practice in or any outdoor practice for some of the kids. So yeah, it's always a great field. The kids I feel like they almost have too much fun out there. I'm always like, they're always playing like flag football. And they're doing all kinds of crazy games. And it's like, be careful, because there's been a couple kids that have had to WD from injuries, having a little too much fun. And I remember there's a kid, I hope he's in the field this year, Rawson Hardy. He used to be a flag bearer there, and I just saw that he committed and I think already signed with Georgia Tech. He's going to go to Tech a year early, so congrats to him.
His grandparents are sort of like the ones behind the event, right? I believe.
Yeah. So it's cool to see him now. He's grown up and he hits the ball a mile. It's fun to watch.
All right, so what's your next pick?
Ooh, I guess I should have. I'm going to go with. To me, it's a newer event, but it's probably almost 10 years old now. The Dustin Johnson Junior World. It's another early event. It's in Myrtle Beach, and they've done a great job. They used to the first year they started, they tried to compete against the Simplify, and then they realized they weren't going to get any of the good players, the top players, I should say. They're not going to pass up Simplify. So they moved it, I think, a couple of weeks after, and now it gets a great field. It's a lot of the same kids that you get at Simplify, and it's very well run. They just do a great job. There's always a good champion. It's just a great event.
Oh, that's great. I've never been there. My son hasn't played in it, but a couple of wrinkles. It's very strong field, very difficult golf course. Yeah. So the scores generally are pretty high. I honestly think that it should get more AJGA points than it does, which in my ways, I actually have it ranked a little bit lower for that reason. Again, it's these wrinkles of like, if you had to choose between these events, and I think of like when you play in a tournament, there's really two aspects you need to weigh. There's like, what are you getting out of the event itself? So like the level of competition, the depth of the field, and hopefully the takeaways that come out of it, either good or bad, regardless of how you perform. And then I think of it as also the opportunities that come out of playing in the event in terms of doors that it can open for you, and this is where the nuances, honestly, of JGS, Junior Golf Scoreboard, and Wagger, and Rolex points, like you need to factor all of these things in when you're making these decisions, right or wrong. Like you just, sure. I think you need to. And I think this actually works against the DJ World Tournament, even though I think it's a fantastic tournament, because I calculated what I'm calling like the true Rolex, which is their methodology based on the strength of the field itself that they use to assign the points that don't have this sort of preset thing. Right. And it's based on the players in the field and their top 10s over the last year, et cetera, et cetera. So Dustin Johnson, it actually should get a 225 point event. So I'm going to lobby, I don't know the powers that be or what it takes to get into that highest tier. It seems to me that the DJ World Tournament has earned that right, because of the sustained history. And if it did that, it might actually lead to this tournament becoming even bigger. So sure. I'm putting that out there now, and maybe the powers that be can come together and hammer that out. But to me, it seems like it like you said, it has that strength of field, and the winner that comes out of that has definitely done an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, it is a little harder to get to. Myrtle Beach is not necessarily the easiest spot to get to. So I can understand that, again, when you're talking about expenses, if you're coming from the other side of the country, and you don't get necessarily as many coaches because there's coaches, their season's going strong there, the spring season's going. So, but it's the field is strong enough and you win that or put up some good scores, coaches see that, and it's like, okay, yeah, good playing. Because the roughs, because they oversee that place, so it looks beautiful. And then it's also got probably some of the best rough year in and year out for a junior golf event. So I like to see the kids getting challenged there.
Yeah. I was just talking to Mac there from Junior Golf Scoreboard, and they have this course adjustment thing, and the most you could get is 4. But I actually think like the DJ tournament, there might be an argument. Some years it should get something above 4 because the scores are that usually pretty high.
Yeah. It's a good event.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go a little bit of a wrinkle here. We can talk about it, and maybe I'll ask you to expound on it. I'm going to pick the Junior PGA Championship.
Yep.
And I wouldn't pick it this high every year. So you want to talk about the wrinkle if it's the 2025 Junior PGA versus the 2024?
Exactly. And that's why I think I picked the Dustin Johnson, because Junior PGA is a great event. They do a great job hosting it. They generally find some awesome courses, but you want to play it on the year of a Junior Ryder Cup. That's when you get the strongest field, because when you don't have the Junior Ryder Cup year, it usually goes up against the Western Amateur, and some of the top juniors get invited to that, and they'd much rather go play the Western Amateur over the Junior PGA, and I can't fault them for that. So yeah, it's it's an every other year. It's a super field, and then the other years it's still really strong and a great event, but it's not quite the same field. So
yeah. So, and I think like I said, the opportunities that can come out of performing well. So the top 2 guys in this tournament in a Ryder Cup year earn a spot on the Junior Ryder Cup team. That's true for both the boys and the girls.
Yep.
I think they also stipulate that you have to play in the Junior PGA in order to be eligible for the Junior Ryder Cup team.
Correct.
And just, we're talking Bethpage Black, being in a team event, like all of these things, it's going to have a very strong field because guys are going to want to be on that team and have that experience. And obviously, even above and beyond just the experience of playing in a full field, 225-point AJGA event, it has a lot going for it. So I think it will have a very strong field this year. I maybe have a problem with it being up against the Western Am and some of the trade-offs there. But in any case, something to be said for the PGA of America and the point system that they have, and it kind of this is maybe like their Super Bowl culmination of their points series leading up into the Junior Ryder Cup team being named.
Right. Yeah, those are fair points. But I think it's a great event, and I think it does deserve to be ranked very highly in a junior golf scheduling.
Yeah.
Deal.
All right, you're on the clock. What's up?
Let's go with. I was going to say Sedgefield, but I'm going to go with the Western Junior. Okay. Speaking, since we're talking about the Western Amateur, if you can get into the Western Junior, that's your ticket to start making those relationships to eventually, hopefully, play in the Western Amateur, which usually happens when you get into the college age kids. But the Western Junior is a great event. The WGA does an amazing job. They always pick a super course, generally around the Chicagoland area. The champions are usually really strong, but it's a field that some years seems to be stronger than others, but it's always going to get a lot of college coaches because they're just coming out after NCAAs. A lot of them will hit Sedgefield maybe the week before, but they might also be running their camps, so they might not hit Sedgefield. And a lot of the Sedgefield's the top tier kids, where you have a larger group of players, so it can draw a lot more mid-level tier schools out. So it gets a lot of the coaches out there, so they get talking and to start talking about things like roster limits and whatever's the hot topic of the summer is going to be for them. So it's always a fun event, very well run, and that's my next pick. It's the Western Junior.
Yeah. I would say like probably bang for the buck for coaches. That probably has the most value, right? Because it's 156 kids. It's right. It's usually like corresponds exactly right around this June 15th time period, either immediately after, immediately like right before. So it's like when these kids are fresh in mind, or maybe you're able to actually have these conversations over the course of the tournament, not face to face, obviously. Right. But in any case, I think it's a great event. I think it's also, even just making the cut at the Western Junior is one of the toughest cuts to make. And then you have the final round, 36 holes. Like, showing out there and making the cut and then making up some ground that last day, I think is really a way to demonstrate, a level of talent to these coaches that are out there. I think that's a really good opportunity. I will say a couple of things with Western. You talked about the strength of field, and I don't think this is anything against the tournament. And maybe I'm going to get on my AJGA soapbox again.
Sure.
I think the Junior PGA suffers a little bit. These full field events, they need to do something with the point system and point allocation of these full field events, because like finishing 20th in the Western Junior is actually probably a really good performance and very difficult to do.
Yeah.
It's much, much different than finishing 20th in an AJG Invitational or even like Sage Valley, right? They get the same amount of points. And in a lot of ways, what I observe is the top tier kids are maybe avoiding the Western Junior because they're worried about if I have a slightly off tournament, that it's going to put too much damage on my AJGA, and it doesn't open up those doors with respect to Rolex, All-American teams, or maybe some of these Wyndham Cup, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so there's all these ramifications. So when I look at these tiering, I see only 11 of the top 40 played in the Western, but 22 of the next 40. So to me, that screams that a little bit that the top tier in some ways are avoiding, and I think it's only because of this points thing.
Sure.
To me, the obvious thing is what they could do is they could have a 225 event point allocation for full field events, and maybe it just doesn't decline as quickly as, so maybe second place is worth more than the second place in a regular event, but then 20th is also worth as, because you're basically beating a lot more guys than you would before, like something that factors that in. I would think that would do this tournament a really nice service in terms of guys not avoiding it. And I think Junior PGA is in a similar boat. And I think the Southern Junior especially, I think, has suffered as a result of this, for right or wrong. So anyways, that's my soapbox. If I were commissioner of the AJGA one day, I would fix that.
And I would wish that they would start listening to you. Your math is great. You definitely check your math. It's solid.
Yeah. Okay. So my next pick, I'm going to go with the Rolex Tournament of Champions. It's kind of an end of season celebration. You have to be on one of these first, second, or honorable mention teams in order to get invited. They also recognize a few of the academic All-Americans and like the service guys. So they're invited as well. So it's a relatively smaller field. It's been down in San Antonio these last few years. It seems like a semi-permanent home, if not a permanent home. But really, really strong field. Like it was 330 Wagger this past event. Again, a 225. But like 28 of the top 40 were at the Rolex in the first tier, and only 7 of the second 40. So that speaks to the depth of the field and the concentration of the top guys, really wanting to show out. The other interesting wrinkle is sort of the start of the next year in terms of the Rolex Player of the Year stuff. So really good performance there again could set you up, almost guarantee that you're going to make the Wyndham Cup teams, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it helps with the scheduling of the following year if you perform well in the Rolex. And look, like your guys want to be in this event. The banquet's really cool. The recognition around just the hard work that goes into performing at a high level, it deserves to be recognized for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I liked it better when the Tournament Champions was played in the summer. It used to be a few years ago that the Tournament Champions was in the summer, and you had the polo that had a match play component there at Thanksgiving time. And so they had bigger fields, 156, or maybe not 156, but I'm sure they had 78 boys, 78 girls on the 2 courses, and they got it down to 32 kids for match play, and then they went from there. And that was a lot of fun. But the Tournament of Champions then was in the summer, and it had bigger fields that allowed for better championship play. I mean, I remember Philip Barbary out in Sun River, 2015, the summer of Philip, because he won the U.S. Junior that year. But he won by maybe 10. I mean, he just played amazing. His first bogey came on the 67th hole. I remember, and I think I might have jinxed him by telling his mom, like, oh, he hasn't made a bogey yet this tournament. Immediately hits a 4 on a par 3, 3
Yeah.
putts. So
yeah, I didn't even mention that the 72 hole tournament. There's not too many of them. The Western Junior is another one, but the last day is 36 holes, and I just think like over the course of 72 holes, the cream just rises to the top, and that's really cool to see. It's a very deserving, very deserving champion there.
Absolutely, and just it's great. The AGA again, their invitationals, they're always going to be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one.
All right, you're up.
I'm gonna go with what do we got left here? Well, there's a bunch of good ones. I'm gonna go with my first sort of regional-ish one. It's not that regional, but I'm gonna go with the Bobby Chapman.
Okay.
It's been played in September or October. This year they moved it down into Charleston, but I assume it's going to be back up in South Carolina. It's generally been a 2-day event. They added a third day to try to get Wagger points, but kids, for some reason, that seemed to turn off some of the top kids. They didn't want to, I guess, I don't know. It's always been a fascinating, weird to me that didn't get as strong a field as it probably could have. But it's a tough time of the year. It's the fall. I get it, but the Bobby Chapman's a great, more of a regional deal. Although it does draw kids from across the country. I mean, it gets kids from California and the West Coast. But I'm gonna throw out the Bobby Chapman.
Yeah, I was interested because it went 2 years ago. I think last year, and then this year it was 36 holes. And I guess it's really the only AJGA event that gets points outside of maybe like the Junior All Stars. That's 36 holes. Like all the opens and everything. There are 3 rounds. So I wasn't really sure. I wasn't even sure what would happen with the points assignments. When it went to 36 holes, but it's still getting very, very strong points. I believe it was 120 point event this year.
Wow. Yeah. It's a well run. It's been going on for a long time. I just think it's a great event.
I wanted to bring up one other thing about the Rolex Tournament Champions. They should, if you win an AJG Open, you should get an invite to the Rolex Tournament Champions. It's kind of like Kapalua, right, in the PGA Tour.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's what they did when they had the bigger field when it was in the summer. I can't remember. I just didn't look that closely, but they might have. But because I agree, yeah. I mean, it seems like you should have all the champion.
False advertising.
They have too many events though now. There's too many opens.
That's true. All right, so my pick, I'm going to go back in the invitational land. The Team TaylorMade seems to be a very, very strong field at 26 of the top 40. So this event usually, I think it's Memorial Day weekend. They haven't. It moves around, but I don't know where it is this year. It's still TBD. But I think it's because of the Wyndham Cup. You have to play in 2 events, two AJGA, like actual AJGA events. Prior to the Polo in order to be eligible for the Wyndham Cup. And then as you get into June, those players are maybe playing in more local amateur events or national amateur events. So what I observe is like you got guys who are playing, basically their 2 events are going to be the Simplify and the Team TaylorMade, which then makes them eligible for Wyndham Cup. So that seems to be what's going on here and driving a lot of these decisions. But in my sort of true Rolex ranking, it should be worth 350 points instead of 225. So that speaks to the strength of that event. Actually, Simplify should be worth 400 points just as a benchmark. And last year's event was 186 points on Wagger, 72 players in the event. So anyways, I do think that this is like a really strong event, a really good performance. That this is Memorial Day, so it's like kind of the right start of the summer. So that momentum hopefully can lead into the events in June where guys are maybe even playing like every week or a lot of those weeks in June, especially. So I think it's a really strong event.
It is. It used to, I guess it sort of replaced the Thunderbird, at least on the men's side. The Thunderbird was the big end of May invitational the AGA ran out in Phoenix. They're at Greyhawk. But when the NCAAs moved out there, they had to get rid of that. TaylorMade went ahead and said we can do a boys one because now the girls have a lot more well, they have a lot more, but they have more invitationals on the AGA available to them, and I think that this year might be the Nelly Corda is there in May for them. So yeah, the AGA May Invitational is going to be a good one, and yeah, Team TaylorMade's. I think Ben James won did he win the first two, or
Yeah.
he won a couple of them. So
Yeah.
It doesn't have a long history, but it's got some good champions.
Yeah.
So
They
far.
played on some good courses too. Yeah.
Yeah, they have. I'm gonna keep going. Maybe more regional stuff.
Okay.
I guess on my picks. Because I'm going to go. Well, it's actually this one should not be regional. It's the Junior Worlds out in Torrey Pines. I just know it doesn't get the strength of the American field has not been as good the last few years as it traditionally had been, but it does get a ton of international players. It's at Torrey South most years for the guys, so that's great. And it's just there's age group tournaments too, so they're all throughout Southern California. It's a fun week of junior golf out in San Diego area, so that's my pick.
Yeah, and that's going to be pretty highly rated Wagger. I mean, it's a very, very large field event, so I think it's the exposure to coaches, because I guess I wanted to ask you this. I don't have enough perspective on this. For this class of 2026, I know it's kind of a crazy time, but below, like at what point would you say, like, if you're below a certain ranking or above a certain ranking, like, you're going to be basically recruited by high level D1? And then I think you start to see these programs are maybe making this decision. Or I'm really going to take a close look at some of these international. Some programs are really have a pipeline of international kids, but like, it seems like those schools are very closely paying attention to what's going on in San Diego, around these international players.
Yeah, and I don't know what the magic number is for everyone, but a lot of schools, once they kind of, if everyone wants to get a top 10 type kid, and obviously there's only 10 schools that might get that, because some might double up or triple up, but so yeah, I mean, past champions out of Junior Worlds. I mean, I think Joaquin Neiman won it twice. It often gets an international champion. Although again, it just feels since COVID, the field's just been weaker, a little weaker, even on the international side. Because I can't even remember, but it gets a bajillion coaches. They love San Diego in July, especially Torrey. It's nice. You're finally not sweating. Like, it's nice and cool. So it's a great spot. Coaches, once they miss on the top Americans, it's easy for them to jump over and start looking for international players.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to get your perspective on my next pick, because I don't have any experience with it. But the polo at Bethpage Black, the match play event. So this is 32 players. They play in like pods. I think 3 rounds of match play in 8 different pods, and then one guy advances from the pods, and then they have kind of bracket style from there. So like even advancing out of your pod, I think, is a pretty significant accomplishment in and of itself. But just like the match play experience, it's a month and a half before the U.S. Junior. I think that can be very, very helpful. Again, like we talked about the Junior Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black this year. I have to believe the PGA of America, they have one captain's pick. I think at least one captain's pick. They're probably looking pretty closely at like who's playing well at Bethpage Black. So I think that's a little bit of a wrinkle this year that might persuade somebody to play in the polo. And again, it's a 225 point event, so a relatively small field. So Penson Badgett won last year, and he had a really good run over the middle of the summer. The only downside I see is, like I said, it is tough to get out of your pool. The Wagger points aren't necessarily super high, so I think if you don't advance out of your pool, it can be a hit on Wagger. That's something to consider. But what's your general sentiment around that event?
Yeah, I've not been since they moved. Again, it used to be that was the tournament champions, and polo was in November. So since they've gone up to Bethpage Black, I've not gone to the event because it's too small of a field. I personally just don't like match play, but it's for the kids. It's a great experience because I mean, your U.S. Junior, U.S. Amateur, they come down to match play. The Western, it's the Western, the Western goes to match play. The Western Am, but then obviously NCAAs the last 15 years or so have been decide by match play. So it's great to get some match play experience. And I would say you bring up some good points for and against it. As far as it's a small field, so there's an opportunity to potentially get a lot of the AGGA points at least, but it might hurt some on your WAGR, and then there's the potential not. Coaches are going to go. I mean, who doesn't want to walk around Bethpage black? Although I guess I've chosen not to, but June's a hard month. I mean, there's a lot of events. So, I don't, again, for the match play experience, and if you have the opportunity, I think I would go and just, enjoy the week and have a good time up in the New York area.
I think it is the last event for the last spot in the Wyndham Cup. So you do, I believe that's the case. So you actually see some jockeying a position around, this guy wins the match, then this kid is in. There's these interesting wrinkles attached to that. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right, you're up.
Yeah. All right. I'll jump back, staying on my regional thing. I'm going to go with the Future Masters, which again has just got a lot of history. It's a southeastern deal. It's it's down in Alabama, in Dothan, Alabama, maybe the hottest place on earth in mid-June. I mean, it is super hot. You got those gnats. It's crazy, but it's huge. It means a lot still in the Southeast. I love it. I love that the kids get excited about it because again, they have age groups deals. So kids, play it at a young age. They want to go win it, when they're older. And so if you look at the list of champions, I mean, it's still got even at the older age level, it's still a pretty decent list of players. It gets a lot of coaches. A lot of the Southeast smaller coaches are going to go there because there's just a lot more players for them to go look at. And it's, it's a really cool historical junior event.
Yeah. And I would say, I'm guessing if we were to do a ranking or a draft of, say, younger age divisions, the Junior Masters would be somewhere near the top, I would imagine, right?
Future Masters, probably. Yeah. You get a lot of kids, a lot of coaches. They'll go earlier in the week to maybe catch some of the younger age groups.
Yeah, as you know, we moved to Texas almost 5 years ago now, and I had no awareness of this tournament. And then guys like Henry Guan, he may have probably won his age division, but you just like, what is this tournament? Because they have all this history. You can go back and look at all these leaderboards going back in time, and it was not anything that we ever played in, but it definitely got our attention.
The website is a trip. Yeah, looking at all the pictures of these, especially the younger age groups. Like, oh my God, look at like a young Carl Phillips, and there's all these little kids, and you're just like, wow, way to go.
All right, I'm going to steal one from your regional playbook. I want to talk about the Junior Invitational.
Good one.
And it has a special place in my heart. When we talk about just like the tournament experience, I mean, the experience of playing cricket stick under tournament conditions, firm greens, you have to have all these shots around the greens, in thick rough.
Great rough, yep.
Yeah, just being able to shape your ball. I just think there's something to be said for being able to compete at that level. They also do the 36 holes the first day, which is a little bit akin to college golf and what a lot of players might experience in college golf. Relatively small field, but I think it can be this sort of springboard to success for the rest of the summer, and maybe getting guys into that invitational kind of circle, for the rest of the year. And I think we see that in these regional events. Like, it really is an opportunity for these guys that are maybe trying to bust through the ceiling, right, and get into this upper tier. That in a lot of ways it might take a win or a second place in one of these 100-ish point regional events. So it's really cool to see that the Junior kind of gets recognition, gets AJGA points, and then it's had a very good list of champions in just its short time.
Yeah, it's a relatively new tournament, and it's run superbly. It's the people that are behind it, the Pancake family. I mean, it's a great event. In fact, I think his niece might be running that one in Tennessee. I can't remember what they called it. It was new last year. The one in Nashville.
Oh, the grandma or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think she's part of at least like that group. because I remember I remember talking to them a couple of years ago when they were kind of looking maybe to try to pick a date and stuff, and I was trying to tell them like what was they'd be competing against and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that's interesting. They also it's the only tournament I know of that live streams the final round, which is pretty remarkable. They go to that sort of length. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, the Dye Junior, great choice. I love it.
Thanks.
I'll stick with my regional format. I'm going to go with another one you probably haven't heard of, being from Illinois and then now to Texas, the Junior America's Cup.
It's like a West Coast thing, right?
Yeah. It's a team event out west with some a lot of international teams as well. But it does, it's a stroke play tournament, so that someone wins, and it's got a great, when you see the kids at the junior golf events with Montana or Wyoming, those bags, that's probably from a Junior America's Cup. I've yet to go out there. I've been meaning to go for a couple of years, but it's at the end of July. You're just, it's usually probably like a week after the U.S. Junior, and it's just a tough one to get out to because they'll be out in Canada. They'll play it out, and it's harder to travel out west now that I've moved to the southeast.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've seen the scores in the event, but didn't know too much about it other than they didn't have a Team Texas. Are they Mexico representation as well? Yeah.
Yep. I think 2 teams from Mexico even. Yeah. So, there's a Northern California team, a Southern California, but it's a cool deal out west.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah. All right, I'm going to go back to the AJGA circuit, the Ping Invitational. Traditionally, and I think it's going back this year, it's been at Karsten Creek. Right. Usually, I guess it's Columbus Day weekend. Again, smaller field, 32-player event, but Karsten Creek, and it was at the foul course in Indiana. They tend to choose like real tough tournament tests. Maybe not playing in the greatest weather in the fall either. So I think it is scores are going to be higher, but if you can shoot 74 or 75s, you're probably gaining on the field and demonstrating you have this ability to get your ball in the hole. I think it definitely shows, because those are the types of courses that they play in college, and there's often regionals at Karsten Creek as well. So it's a pretty good signal, I think, if you can perform well there, that you basically can play anywhere. So I saw 19 of the top 40 and then 13 of the second 40 are playing in that, which says a lot for a tournament that only has 32 guys, especially in the fall when kids are back in school. 190 Wagger points is for this most recent one, so one of the higher ones in all of junior golf.
Yeah, and again, traditionally, just a great, that venue's, it's super tough. So coaches know, a lot of kids might be afraid because they're, they don't want to go shoot a round in the 80s, but the coaches know that course can be tough, and especially in certain conditions. They don't worry so much about this occasional 83 from a top kid. Like, that's not going to kill you. So, because you'll have kids, they sometimes skip certain events because they're afraid of shooting a score at a notoriously difficult course. Mm-hmm. But the Pings, it's a great fall event. And I hope it does go back because I'd heard that they might not be going back to Stillwater, but I haven't. This was 2 years ago when they found a place out in California.
Yeah, I think it's still there this year, but I'm not sure what's happening after that.
That would be great because it is a great place for the golf school to show off their facilities.
Yeah. All right, you're up.
Okay. All right, I'll go back to the East Coast with the Junior Jones Cup, and this probably should be higher on my list. I don't know why I didn't put it higher. It's a great event. It's in December. I know I didn't put it higher. One, I wasn't really thinking about it. But two, the weather notoriously is terrible. Some of the worst weather I've ever been in has been on Sea Island in December watching kids play golf. And I mean, some years they've even had to cancel it a couple years ago, or it was just down to one round. So the weather can be difficult. It's usually like runs right up into Christmas. But it used to get a ton of coaches. Obviously now, with the December being a dead period on the men's side, coaches aren't allowed to go out there. So I've only seen one coach out there in the last few years, and he got in trouble for that. So not that I turned him in. Once he realized it, he turned himself in. But great tournament, great history. The winner gets into the Jones Cup Amateur, which is a hard ticket to get. So And again, you look at the list of champions, it's generally a really solid group of players. So
yeah, I don't know too much about the Jones Cup, but they do tend to celebrate their lineage and their history, and like you said, the connection between the junior event and the main invitational, which just wrapped up. I mean, and now it has a PGA Tour accelerated point, which I think is a recognition of just the strength of that field.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's on a PGA Tour course, and if you're playing in the SEC in the future, that's where the S Championship's been for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So you might as well get used to as many rounds as you can on that course.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I'm gonna go regional again. I'm gonna draft the hometown kid, the Byron Nelson Jr.
Yeah.
It's actually I have a conflict because I don't know if I can start him at the same time because it's the same week as the Dye Junior, so I have to pick one in my starting lineup. But the Byron Nelson Jr. early June has a very, very strong history. Like I think Jordan Spieth won it multiple times. Preston Stout won it 3 times. And this Legends Junior Tour in Texas is really the top tour of both North Texas and South Texas kids. And you also get like kids from outside the region will come play. Like Trevor Gutcheski played in the Byron Nelson Jr. this past year. So it has a very good like list of winners. Some of them live in my house. But in any case, 4 of the top 40 played in it last year, and 7 of the next 40. And which is probably pretty rare for like a state event to have that sort of depth of quality. And it doesn't get Rolex points, but I think it would have been like a 120-ish point event based on the depth of that field. So I think it definitely is deserving of recognition here. And I'll say this because I think this might have been one of the first examples that we had. There may be perfectly good reasons to play in a non-AJGA event or a non-Wagger event like the Bobby Chapman. Like this maybe I don't know, in some ways, I don't know if protecting is the right word, but maybe you want to play in this event and you're not, you want the experience of it, but you're worried about the AJGA ramifications of it. You don't have that in this case. So there might be a reason to come down to Texas, play against the best kids in Texas and show out. Obviously, a lot of coaches show up there as well. You can get recognized. And I would put another plug, like I would say a lot of Texas schools maybe are only kind of looking towards Texas kids. So maybe you come down here and you sort of demonstrate, hey, I want to show out and maybe play at one of these Texas schools. There's a bunch of them. So so quick plug for the Byron Nelson Jr.
And a great one. Yeah. I mean, there's not, I think the states with the best junior golf tours are probably Texas. They have a couple, Legends being the strongest one. Southern California's got a couple of great ones, the Northern Tour or the Tour of Northern California, and then the Toyota Tour Cup down in Southern California. But like, I think they don't necessarily have a big name event that I can think of. I mean, I know their championship is really good in December. And then obviously the Florida Junior Tour is going to obviously have a lot of great players as well. But yeah, I mean, for Texas, I feel like that's the big one. And if you're Texas, especially if you're in if you're a Dallas area kid, that's a big event that you want to make sure you get into and play well. All the good Dallas kids over the last decade or so, I know where they're going to be in the beginning of June. They're going to be playing the Byron Nelson, and that's great. So yeah, good call.
All right,
my turn again?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to go with the Scott Robertson in
Virginia.
It's another May event. It's just before NCAAs for me. So it's a good time period. It just traditionally gets a lot of strong players, maybe more so from the Northeast and in the Midwest, or like that Ohio, West Virginia area. There's, in the Mid-Atlantic states too, but some good kids from the South. Occasionally, you get a couple good players though from the West Coast and down in Texas. So and it's got a lot of tradition. So Scott Robertson's and it gets a lot of coaches. Unfortunately, they don't want to be there because they'd rather be at a regional. But if they get eliminated, they will be probably out recruiting the Scott Robertson.
Yeah, but finding that next star player, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and this is getting, I mean, right out of the gates, 150 points. Like some of these events, they move up in points over time, but Scott Robertson, 150 right out of the gates, which speaks to the depth of the field. Probably should be worth something a little bit more than that. So I think it's really cool. Like 90 player events, they really have to show out and play well, and you can get noticed and get recognized. Not something that we've played in or I have any experience into, but definitely recognize the talent, the guys that have won that are really some of the top players.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I want to go with this similar boat. Our friend Mason Carmel and the Elite Invitational. Now this is something. Yeah. This is like the new kid on the block. This is like the I don't know. This is like the up and coming 17-year-old or whatever that we want to draft. So this is actually one of the higher WAGR ranked events in the junior golf scene. Non-AJGA events. Typically has been in the fall, like November-ish time period. I mean, Miles Russell just won the previous one, and was it Blaze Brown won the one before that? So obviously, like very, very strong lineage right out of the gates. And we had Mason Carmel on the pod just talking about the event and just the amount of passion and energy and sweating all the little details that goes into making this event bigger and better every year. That I could just see this continue to grow, and maybe eventually, I don't know what's entailed in terms of getting AJGA points, but I could see this getting, sort of that recognition as well, and the sort of that next level of recognition there. So get in on the ground floor, I think, with the Elite Invitational.
Absolutely, he started it a few years ago, and it's that first week of November. First, second weekend there. The only other thing that's kind of going on is the Net of a Gay. And he's aimed high. He probably overshot the first few years, but he finally got a couple of these kids to finally come in and commit. So it's raised the value of it big time as far as those ranking points go. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see how that keeps going. I thought it was interesting that it was on the same weekend as Georgia, Florida this year. Down in Jacksonville, I was like, well, that's going to be in a pretty expensive hotel room. But it sounded like it worked out great. And, of course, they got the local kid to come in and win it. So that was nice. And, great event. Yeah. I love it.
All right, thanks. All right, what do you got?
Well, we've skipped over some AJGAs, and one of my favorites is Sedgefield. I don't think we talked about Sedgefield.
Yeah.
The Wyndham, it was then the Haas family. It was the HP or the Footjoy Boys. It's had a few different names over the years, but it's been at Sedgefield Country Club historically. And again, the list of champions is really stout, and it's another AJGA Invitational. So you're gonna have good gifts, and you're gonna have a good time. It's on another PGA Tour course. So
I think that's key. I think the opportunity to play on a PGA Tour course, in against the best competition that junior golf has to offer. That has a really strong field of 14 of the top 40, 12 of the next 40. Should be worth about 280 points, but it's worth 225. So I think it's right in the summer. You got guys traveling all over and playing different things, so it's not going to have, say, the Simplify where it's like the only game in town, but it's still you're still showing up with a lot of guys. And I think it used to be 72 holes, and now it's 54. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know if I remember it being 72, but it could have been. It's hard, because I used to feel too like the fields used to be bigger. I feel like 10 years ago at these ages. I think before COVID, that's something I've been meaning to look at. Is like I was like, man, wasn't this a bigger field? And wasn't there a cut? And now there's it's like it's smaller. And it's like okay, whatever.
Yeah, interesting. All right, I'm gonna go similar region, the North and South Junior. And again, this is non-AJGA, so there isn't really an AJGA play here. But I think like Pinehurst number 2, come on, the opportunity to play a round of golf, a tournament golf on Pinehurst number 2, something that's, it's more, if there really isn't a U.S. Open Rota per se, but Pinehurst is squarely in the Rota. They're gonna have another one in like 4 or 5 years, and we saw this last one was a huge success with Bryson and Rory, battling down the stretch. Also, I think you win that, you get into North and South AM, which is one of the elite AM series events. And Pinehurst number 2 is just one of my favorite golf courses in the world, and I think it's one of the best experiences being able to play and test your shot making and your short game skills, against a really stout field. I think there's something to be said for that.
That's a good one. I'll go with an AJGA. But non-invitational, one of my favorites, but I can't remember. It's been a few. When I lived in Denver, I used to go down to this one every year. It would be it's Easter weekend. The Heather Farr down out in Scottsdale. Great champions, great course. It was like it wasn't an invitational, but it like should have been an invitational type deal. It might have been kind of replaced recently now with the Sergio Garcia. That might be getting stealing.
Well, that's gone now too.
Oh well.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is the Easter AJGA events that 3-day weekend was sort of a target, for big events.
I've watched a couple of new PGA Tour players. Frankie Sappin won it 1 year, and then William Mao, who butchered up the 16th hole there. You might have saw highlights.
I did see that. I tried to forget it.
I guess. Yeah. Right. What a great kid, though. He'll be fine. He also won the Western Junior. He won Junior Worlds, or at least the 13, 14s. That kid's going to be fine. But yeah, the Heather Farr, it was a great event. And it's had a lot of history, and she was quite a lady herself. If any people they want to Google or Wikipedia Heather Farr, she's got an interesting story.
Yeah, that's cool. I do think I just a quick plug on these spring events, because a lot of them they get very, very strong fields, and they're either ranked like 100 or even 120 point events. So what happens with the AJGA points, for people that might not be aware, is based on the initial strength of field is sort of assigned a point value. But if the guys in that field go on to have more success over the course of the year, the points of that event can actually move up over time. So something can go from 100 to 120 to 100, 150. I think this tournament, the Heather Farr, traditionally has been sort of in that 100, 120. I think its past one was 120 points. So, and even more of these larger field events that have a cut, like you have more opportunity for those guys to go on and do bigger and better things. So I think what you see, and guys are also trying to cement their sort of fully exempt status. Either if they don't have it, probably most of these guys have it, but they're cemented for the following year as well. So a good finish here, it can lead to that, and it can help sort of facilitate and make clear the scheduling for the rest of the year, having some of this early season success. So you see a lot of these spring events have very, very strong fields. I was actually going to go in the same direction. I think the Innisbrook event in Florida. I think that. This is my next AJGA plug if they name me commissioner. Because I honestly, I track these things very, very closely. One friend of the family won the Innisbrook, Brooks Harper, won it this past year. And I would say that it was probably 1 nanosecond away from going from 120 points to 150 points. Like it just needed one little edge. It got right up to the edge, and it didn't quite get assigned that value. And that, honestly, that 30 points probably would have unlocked things for the winners and the top finishers in that event. So my proposal to the AJGA for listening, I think there needs to be additional categories. There needs to be 100, 110, which doesn't exist today. It goes straight to 120. And then between 120 and 150, there should be a 135. And again, that's just to recognize that not all 120s are the same. And some of them, like Innisbrook, probably should have gotten a 135, right? Because they had the strength of the field. And there's no reason why they shouldn't do that. Like it should recognize that, it's just another category on their sheet. Like it's not much much coding difference. So anyways, a quick plug to the Innisbrook, a very strong field every year. Yeah, no, it is. And another PGA Tour course, I think, right? I think they played they play Copperhead or whatever they call that? I actually am not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think so, but it might not. But yeah, good one. I will go with, I don't know what numbers we're down to, but the I guess the Junior Orange Bowl is a popular one. It gets a lot of coaches because they like to go to Miami. It's beginning of the year. It used to get a lot more American kids. Maybe some better American kids used to go. That used to be a must kind of play, and now it's not a must play. You'll get more of the local Florida kids. Maybe some other kids as well, but not. It's not as strong as it used to be on the American side, but it still gets a lot of internationals. And as we've talked about, coaches
once they miss on the top American kids, they look for the top international kids. So the Junior Orange Bowl on a golf course, it's I don't know what it's it's Miami in January, so it's a good place to be, I guess.
Yeah. If you're looking for a place, some tournament golf over Christmas break, that's a good. I think
with
probably
coaches.
A good option. Yeah, with coaches there. All right, I'm gonna go another. I'm assuming that the Mayakoba is not on the calendar, so I think it's declared professional or something, or declared as going to live. So, but in any case, that's off the draft board. I'm gonna go another spring AJGA regional event, the KJ Choi, and I think that the one in Texas in particular. This one I think was worth 120 points last year. Probably could have made that 135 benchmark. But again, just like the strength of field of guys, like 13 of the guys of this top 80 kind of group are in that, which is pretty high relative to this kind of tier that we're talking about. But I just want to give a shout out to KJ Choi, namely, because I think he's the only guy that sponsors multiple AJGA events that I can think of. So anyways, shout out to KJ and just everything you're doing for junior golf. That is going way above and beyond. But this event in and of itself, like playing Texas in the spring, you're going to have a strong field. It's an opportunity, like I said, to set the year off on a strong foot and get into other things down the road with a good performance here. Yeah,
no, that's a good one. And yeah, it is great that he puts on so many events there through the AGA.
All right, we want to do. We'll do one more each.
Sure. One more.
You got a sleeper?
I think so. Well, I'm going to go to the hottest place on earth, the Bubba Conley in Memphis. It's another one that again used to be a really big deal. I think it still gets a lot of coaches. They just like to sweat in Memphis. I have not been since they moved it to a different course a few years ago. That's apparently you just boil. But it was hot before, so it's Memphis in June. I mean it's going to be early July, so it's just hot. But again, they had the ice cream trucks, and I don't know if that's still there. But the big thing was they had an ice cream truck. You could go in and grab yourself, popsicle or something. It was nice. But again, it used to be a really big deal. It's probably not as big, but regionally, it still gets a lot of good players from the Southeast.
Yeah. Was that one, I was sort of shied away from that one because I think this is when my son was younger, but they had like the stated yardage of like 7,400 yards. Did they ever play it that long? Because the scores didn't really seem to be that high.
I wouldn't think. I can't imagine. Yeah. That was played at that distance.
Yeah, and that is an event that will get AJGA points as well. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so I mentioned the Southern Junior earlier. It has a soft place in my heart. They play a very, very good courses. I mean, Country Club at Charleston a couple years ago, just really a fantastic Seth Rayner golf course. Another opportunity with a full field event and a cut. I imagine it gets quite a few coaches kind of going to that and showing up at that. And, it's a 120 point event, like kind of pushing that 150 range with the stronger field. I think it has suffered from this sort of full field kind of point allocation with the AJGA. So maybe some guys are just avoiding it altogether, but like Tyler Watts won it a couple of years ago. And that was really when he was really kind of coming on the scene. So anyways, has a really good lineage.
Yep. Tommy Morrison. I mean, it's got a lot of the recent champions have all been. It's a good historical event. They move it around, like you said, to really great courses, and it does get a ton of coaches. It's another big event in June that I think if you have an opportunity to play it, you should play it. But I understand if you do have the Junior and the Western and the Sedgefield, it can get. That's the one that probably gets the most passes because it's like, we got so many tournaments right now, and that's the one we're going to skip. So.
I guess there's one wrinkle. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think these organizations like the Western, the Jones Cup, they run both the junior and the amateur events, and the Jones Cup junior, like it's a committee and the invites, it's a little bit like shrouded in mystery. I think that there's something to be said for establishing good relationships and performing well in the junior version of the event that you can't say that necessarily would lead to an invite down the road. But if you're sort of a borderline and they're picking amongst like who's the last guy they're going to invite, like some name recognition goes a long way. It's like, oh, I remember that kid. He's a really good kid. Or I remember that family. It's a really good family. So
absolutely.
All these little things matter.
If you pick that over some other opportunity.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Starting to build those relationships with some of those big amateur events, it could pay off in the future.
Yeah. And the Southern Am is now getting a PGA Tour accelerated point, and I believe they're playing at Southern Hills in 2026. So some really nice courses that they travel to and go to. It's pretty cool. All right, so this has been awesome, right? Any guys you're gonna sign as free agents? Any sort of odds and ends you wanna capture?
For what are we talking about? Like a golf tournament?
Yeah, any tournaments that you want to mention?
Oh man, I think we talked about a lot of these good one-off. Oh, the Gator Invitational. I don't know what's going on with that guy. He's been in and out. It used to be a kid who's already gone through college. I've noticed some of these good tournaments when the kid's still in junior golf and in college golf. There might be a parent that's really kind of leading the club to put on a good tournament. And once they kind of go off into the business world, or hopefully the PGA Tour, it stops. But the Hope Valley, that guy works really hard. And then a lot of in the Carolinas, that's a North Carolina one. The Azalea, the Junior Azalea down in Charleston, is a great one. There's a lot of good little tours. There's a lot of really good little one-off events. The Hudson Junior in Ohio. That's one I should probably mention because it's more of a regional one. I look at the list of winners and I can barely recognize some of the winners, but like they're guys that have gone on and had great careers, like at a Ball State or a Marquette. It's like, okay, so it gets good. It's a good regional Ohio, Michigan, West Virginia, that kind of area group of things. So go support those things because we've lost too many events. I feel like, especially since COVID. Things like the Big I, and although some of them are still around, they just don't get as much publicity from the coaches that I remember, like the Doral, the Publix Doral, whatever they call that now, and the Optimist. Those are still around, so there's some good opportunities out there. And coaches, they know those courses, they know those tournaments. They might have lost some of their swagger with the big ranked players, but again, the coaches will know it because they probably played it. So like, oh wow, you finished 18th there, like that's pretty solid. That's a tough course. So
yeah. Now, how about one last thing? We'll wrap up. I have to believe that you think this is a positive. The exemptions in the U.S. Junior with the state junior championships. So I think 100%. Like being aware of like those exemptions that are out there. And like you said, it was your first pick, and to me, it's the top of the mountain. But like competing at the state level, you don't need to travel far necessarily. Like you could stay local. You don't need to travel across the country to play in an AJGA event. But it can be the thing. Just competing in the U.S. Junior, I think is definitely worthy of recognition. Like qualifying for a U.S. Junior, and I think if anything, like it's a quick plug to play in your state junior if you have the opportunity.
100%, because that's probably going to be a 3-round event too. So it's like, it's not just an 18-hole shootout. I mean, that's the problem with those qualifiers is too many guys can shoot a low score over 18 holes. Mm-hmm. So it can be really tough. So if your state junior offers it, and a lot of them do now, go definitely sign up play for it, and you got probably 3 or 4 rounds to go prove that you belong at the U.S. Junior.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, Ryan, this is awesome. Hopefully this is super instructive. Quick plug, Agora Golf. That's the Twitter handle. A lot of good information there. Like I would say, make it your notification. You could be, you get the instant notification whenever you post something related to golf or what's happening in the amateur golf scene. You follow it probably as closely as anybody. And I think this podcast episode just really demonstrated your your encyclopedia knowledge around everything that's been happening around junior golf and the history of these events. I honestly don't think there's anybody that pays as close attention to it as you do. So thank you for your service on behalf of these parents and players and helping navigate the scene.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And, I can't do this without all of you guys. So keep playing. Keep dreaming.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Well, I'm sure we'll cross paths in the very, very near future.
Absolutely.
All right.
Take care. Talk to you, Jim.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.
Yo, rise up. If you're down with Ryan Frazer, he's on the Driven Golf Pod. Stories to amaze ya. Agora Golf in the house, a true game changer. Climbing up the ranks from AJs to majors. Who's that figure rising up through the weeds? Nobody bigger, matching needs with degrees. With his data feeds, see his brilliancy exceeds. Agora Golf steeds, planting championship seeds. Ryan Frazer, with a sniper's laser precision. Guiding young golfers, chasing dreams, his mission. Yo, pass the mic when he talks, y'all should listen. He see golf's future like X-ray vision. Yo, June 15th, circle it, set the stage. Rise up 27s, activate and engage. Recruiting frenzy rivals, 5-star front page. Bro knows more than Yoda, a world-class sage. Parents heed his wisdom, cause every word is gold. Navigating recruiting strategy unfolds. Patience, persistence, it never gets old. Passion, ignition, yo, it's about to explode. Yo, rise up, raise up. If you're down with Ryan Frazer, he's on the Driven Golf Pod. Stories to amaze ya. Agora Golf in the house, a true game changer. Climbing up the ranks from AJs to majors. Who's that figure rising up through the weeds? Climbing up the ranks from AJs to majors. Locked in, top 10, never fold under pressure. Data-driven grind, mental flex of a professor. Every tournament tested, the blueprints perfected. Recruitment dissected, now college is invested. Western junior battles got them fighting for position. Coach eyes, 5 guys, every putt feels ambition. Stroke play, match play, dial in precision. Legacy Christen when you listen to his vision. Break it down, Byron Nelson, legends in the making. Future masters grind, ain't no time for hesitation. Scouting every leaderboard, stats and calculations. Frazer got the playbook for your elevation. Yo, rise up, raise up. If you're down with Ryan Frazer, he's on the Driven Golf Pod. Stories to amaze ya. Agora Golf in the house, a true game changer. Climbing up the ranks from AJs to majors. Who's that